All right, so now that you know a little bit about ROMs and games and what they are, now we need to figure out how to actually get them from the internet onto our Raspberry Pi. And there are a couple ways to do that. Like I mentioned earlier, you can actually go on your Windows 10 PC or a Mac and plug a USB drive in and download the ROMs to that, and then you can plug it in on your Raspberry Pi, and there's some steps you can do that'll automatically copy them over. I'll provide a link in the description on how to do that if that's the method you want to go. But I generally find for long-term viability and in the fact that you're going to want to probably do this lots of different times, the USB method can be a little cumbersome and tiresome. So setting up Wi-Fi is probably your best bet. Plus, once your Raspberry Pi is on Wi-Fi, you get some other advantages there as well. So you're going to probably want to do Wi-Fi anyway, regardless of how you get your ROMs on your Raspberry Pi. So remember that you need Wi-Fi on the Raspberry Pi. So the Raspberry Pi 3 does have Wi-Fi built in. Or if you get a Raspberry Pi Zero W, it's called the Zero, which is a small Raspberry Pi. It's meant more for like handheld type stuff if you want to do handheld gaming. The W stands for wireless. But if you have a Raspberry Pi 1 or 2, it doesn't have built-in Wi-Fi. I might have mentioned earlier that the 2 does. It actually doesn't. So you need to have the Raspberry Pi 3. That's the one I recommend that I mentioned earlier. But if you have a 4, that also has built-in Wi-Fi. If you have a Raspberry Pi 2, what you need to do is buy a Wi-Fi dongle, and you can get those on Amazon or other places online for fairly cheap. Again, links will be in the description if you want to purchase one of those because you don't want to buy a Raspberry Pi 3 because maybe you already have the 2. But regardless, getting Wi-Fi on there is a good idea. Now also, you can just use Ethernet if you want. You can use the direct Ethernet connection that's on the port here. So Raspberry Pi 1 even has that on it. So if you don't want to do Wi-Fi at all, you can just plug in Ethernet. The issue there is that you have to be close to your router because generally you'd need to plug the cable from the router into your Raspberry Pi. And if you end up putting your Raspberry Pi in a den or a living room or a bedroom or something, you're probably not close to the router, and so then you're going to need Wi-Fi. But do realize you can use Ethernet, the old school, kind of where you plug in the network. That'll work as well, because basically the idea here is we just want to get our Raspberry Pi on the network so we can easily transfer our ROMs from our Windows 10 computer to our Raspberry Pi. So what you'll see is you'll go into the configuration screen that you see here, and down you'll scroll down and you'll go down where it says Wi-Fi, and you'll choose that. It might give you a warning, something about it says you haven't set up your Wi-Fi country yet. Sometimes that warning comes up. I think on newer versions of RetroPie they've kind of gotten rid of it. But regardless, if it does come up, you probably want to do this either way. So it'll say, do you want to launch Raspi config? And so you'll hit that. You'll hit yes. If it doesn't ask you that, then you can also choose Raspi config over in the configuration menu. But either way, you want to get to this screen, and then it'll ask you to choose what's called localization options. Remember, the Raspberry Pi was actually developed and still is manufactured in the UK. So it's kind of out of the box, it thinks it's in the United Kingdom. So Wi-Fi works slightly different in different countries. It uses different frequencies and stuff. And so basically you have to tell it which country you're in so it can kind of update the software and the firmware to use the correct wavelengths, basically, I think is kind of how it works. So regardless, choose, once you go into Raspi config, you're going to go to the localization options, number 4, and then the next screen you'll see here is it'll ask you to change your Wi-Fi country. Again, the default is usually the UK, United Kingdom, so you're going to want to go in there and change it to US. You can also go in here and change your time zone. I would actually recommend setting up your keyboard as a US keyboard because a UK style keyboard is actually slightly different. The keys are in slightly different spots in terms of some of the symbols. The letters and the numbers are all the same, obviously, but some of your symbols and stuff, especially if you have complicated passwords, Wi-Fi passwords that use symbols, you're going to want to change where it says change keyboard layout. You're going to change that to the United States as well, and then you can choose like just a generic 101 key keyboard type thing. Okay, so you can do that, and then next, again, like it says here, if you're using Ethernet, you don't have to do any of this because you're already connected to the internet if you're plugged in with Ethernet to your router. But again, I think Wi-Fi is probably a better option for most people. And now you can go back down to the Wi-Fi setting in your configuration screen, and then you'll click Wi-Fi, or you'll choose Wi-Fi with your controller. At this point, you probably still have your keyboard plugged in, so you can use the keyboard the keyboard arrows, or you can use your controller that you have. And then go down to Wi-Fi, and then you're going to choose connect to a Wi-Fi network. All right, choose a Wi-Fi network, and then you should see all the Wi-Fi networks that are available in your house. So again, remember, this only works on a Raspberry Pi 3. That's the one I recommend, or a 4. Or if you have an older one or two, you need to get a Wi-Fi dongle or Wi-Fi adapter. And those, again, those are fairly cheap, but it's another thing you have to buy. So just be aware of that. So choose your network, and then you should be able to type in your password. Okay. And once you type in your password, that's why you plugged in the keyboard, because this is where you have to type in your Wi-Fi password. And then you're done with your keyboard, actually. So once you get it connected to the internet or the Wi-Fi, or again, if you're using Ethernet, you don't even need the keyboard. But if you're using Wi-Fi, you got to type in your password. Hit OK. You might have to do a reboot. I don't think in this stage it'll ask you to reboot. I can't remember. I don't think it does. But it's always a good idea to reboot when you make some system level changes, as I've mentioned in the past. And adding your Raspberry Pi to the network is definitely a system level change. And so that'll, you might want to do a restart. Okay. So we're connected to the network. Now the next step is going to be, now that we're connected, we have an internet connection. We're gonna look at expanding the SD card, and we'll learn that in the next step. And then finally, we'll get to download some ROMs from the internet on our Windows 10 computer and transfer them via Wi-Fi or Ethernet, if you're using Ethernet, over to your Raspberry Pi. So give this a shot. The Wi-Fi usually sometimes can trip people up a little bit, but give it a shot. Links in the description. And once you're good with this part, we'll go to the next part. All right. Good luck.